South Africa will receive $8.5 billion to help end its reliance on coal in a deal announced at the COP26 Climate Summit this week. Our COP26 interview tonight is with Power for All CEO Christina Skiecker. Power for All is a global campaign with over 250 partners around the world, uniquely focused on accelerating the end of energy poverty. And the campaign has also collaborated with utilities, including Eskom, in countries like Uganda, India and Nigeria to introduce a more decentralized clean energy supply. Well, Christina joins us tonight from Glasgow, where the COP26 summit has been taking place. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. I think when one looks at the current debate around how to ensure that countries across the continent really are part of this global, just transition of power. There are real challenges that the African continent is facing that make this conversation perhaps a lot more complicated than it is for the developed world.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Kathy. And it's a pleasure to be here. And just a quick correction. We haven't actually collaborated with Eskom, but utilities like Eskom, yes. So, yeah, just to raise the topic, you're right. I mean, there's a lot going on here at COP, but also globally, to really address this topic of energy poverty. And I think one of the most exciting developments in the last decade has been the growth of the decentralized renewable energy sector. And by that, we mean rooftop solar systems, we mean mini grids, micro hydro, even highly efficient appliances that can work in a weak grid environment. And why is that so exciting? Well, it's because there's still nearly 1 billion people in the world that don't have access to energy, and about another 1 billion that have intermittent access. And in both cases, decentralized renewables can really, really change the trajectory of accelerating the path to energy access.
Decentralized energy, of course, for many people would come with cost implications, and we're seeing again that is one of the main challenges that a country like South Africa is facing when it comes to driving its renewable energy program. I mean, what are the solutions, particularly for countries who are still relying very much on the use of fossil fuels for their baseload energy supply?
Yeah, well, I think one of the great things about decentralized renewables, and whether they're applied in a weak grid environment and really sort of bolstering the grid at different points, or whether they are providing the first connection for millions of people who have never had access to energy. One of the great things is that with decentralized renewables, they're actually built to work within the budget that's already been set up by a lot of these rural and peri-urban users. So in other words, there's a system that's known as pay-as-you-go. So it's quite similar to how Scratch Card works with phones in much of the continent. And the idea is that you can buy as much energy as you need, when you want it, when you need it, and you don't have to deal with a big upfront payment to a grid provider. And so what's wonderful about that is that it works with the budgets people have already set aside for kerosene or potentially for diesel.
What are some of the challenges that you have experienced, I think, when traveling the world and really trying to send across the message of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, there is an incumbent here, right? So traditional electricity grids, traditional fossil fuel has been used for 100 years. And like any challenger, any disruptor, this sector has definitely had to take that on. And in some cases, we have seen pushback. We have seen some positions that people believe we should just pollute the planet as we need to, get everybody electricity, and we'll clean it up afterwards. But I think just given the talks with where we are today at COP26, we can see that that's not a wise solution. And in fact, what we need is to avoid path dependency. So it's coming forward with that discussion, but also bolstering that with really talking about what we call the energy access dividends. So being able to show how this type of technology not only provides faster access, but it also can deliver some amazing development outcomes, including good jobs.
How big a challenge is the issue of financing for renewable energy?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the same issue it is for any kind of fuel. If we looked at how many hundreds of billions of dollars that we've been subsidizing fossil fuel over the last number of years, I don't even think we'd be asking this question. Any kind of infrastructure requires investment, and so financing is important. And one of the great things, again, about what we've been seeing in terms of this sector as it develops is more and more financing ability for larger and larger uses. And that's really what we hope. You know, you want people to have their first connection. It's amazing if it's a renewable energy connection because they then own that power that they're generating in the case of a rooftop solar system, and they get to pay for it over time in a way that suits their budget.
Do you have a clear picture of what is driving the reluctance for renewables, particularly on a large scale, not necessarily within communities that really have not have had access to power before, but from a national government's perspective?
Well, I wouldn't say so much that there's reluctance around renewables. I think that would be taking it a step too far. But I think what there is comfort with the way things have been done, even if the way things that have been done hasn't really delivered reliable energy. So I think it's working with governments to really help them understand how to support the energy access ecosystem. And there's a growing amount of public finance, of venture capital going into this space. It really is meant to be the solution that'll take us forward without destroying the planet.
So in terms of power for all, what is going to be your objective and key takeaway from the current COP summit? What are you really pushing for?
Oh, thanks for that question. And, first of all, I just want to hand it to all the young activists that are marching in the streets. I think it's been amazing to see that kind of turnout from the youth. In terms of what we take away from it, I mean, I think we have to remember that COP is only halfway done, right? So there's still negotiations going on all this week. Even if the Leaders Summit was, one big splashy day last week, the people who actually do the work and are at the table are still at those tables. And so, look, I think there has been some historic things happen. I mean, it's impressive that China's made a commitment not just to fund more fossil fuel in their own country, but overseas development. That's massive. I think it'll be an interesting debate over time how people look at India and think if 2070 is soon enough. But I think one of the best things I've seen is commitments from the private sector, whether it's social entrepreneurs of the kind that I work with in the decentralized renewable space, or with private corporations really stepping up commitments and doing their part, because there is a big role to play for the private sector in this.
Power for All CEO Christina Skiaker joining us from Glasgow. Thank you so much for your time tonight. We'll leave it there.